Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything, and I'm coming at you with another critique video. I normally don't do critique videos. Normally what I do, or, pop culture style videos, normally what I do is gaming videos about either computer gaming, miniature gaming, role-playing games, board games, card games, etc., stuff like that. But I felt like I really needed to do this video about the new Amazon series, Rings of Power. It's a Lord of the Rings TV series on Amazon, and I've got some strong opinions about it, and I also have some comments about other people's critique about the TV series. And so I'm going to bounce around. I don't have a script. I don't have anything. I'm going off of memory. But I do want you to know that I have super strong opinions about this, and it pisses me off. It really does. This afternoon I watched a video called Pop Culture Crisis. It's a Tim Pool production where he's got some people on a side hustle, on a side program where they talk about what's going on in pop culture. And these guys talk about the Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power TV series. And I have to, and I watched this, and this is not the first time I watched it. This is probably the second time I watched their stream where they talked about the Rings of Power. And I also watched another guy, I don't remember his name, where he had talked about the Rings of Power. And I have some thoughts about it. Okay. And I want to share these thoughts because my thoughts are not popular thoughts, or at least not with them anyway. They say things like, this show is no good, or this show has no plot, or this show has no good actors, or this show has, there's no action, or this show has blah, blah, blah. And I'm just going to say, they say a lot of these things. And I don't want to bash them directly because I think they're working with a limited understanding, right? I think, let me just say up front, I enjoy the show. I watch the Rings of Power. I can't wait for the next episode. I am fully invested in this show. And I want to explain why. Because apparently these people are not. So we have an opposed opinion, which is fine. Let's talk about they have a primary actress in this, and I shouldn't even call her an actress. She's an actor, right? Because male or female, it doesn't matter. If you act, you're an actor. So actress is kind of it's a sexist thing to say. Okay, I'm starting to get off into a different tangent, and I don't want to talk about that. But male or female, it doesn't matter. If you act, you're an actor. Just like a female pilot is a pilot. It's not a pilotress. Okay, let me get off that topic. Okay, but I call her an actress anyway. I don't mean it derogatory. So this actor that is playing Galadriel, right? I think, in my own personal opinion, that she is doing an excellent job. I think she is portraying what Galadriel is supposed to be like, right? If you do not, and I can see where people would love to hate her, like J.R. Ewing or whatever. So she's a horrible person, okay? She is arrogant. She is smug. She doesn't show a lot of emotions. She is very skilled at her art, which is combat, which is only combat. She is a soldier, and she is extremely skilled at that. And I can see where someone that doesn't know who Galadriel is, or anything about her character or her personality, would come out, and I'm specifically talking about this pop culture crisis group. I can understand where they would come out and say, man, this Galadriel is a horrible person. She's so smug and she's so arrogant. Man, she's got the worst character plot in the TV series. I hate watching her, etc. Right? So I can understand, if you don't know anything about her, why you would say that about her. But Tolkien, okay, let's if there's going to be some spoilers, but not really, because there shouldn't be any spoilers, because all of this is already written. It was written many, many decades ago. So if you want to know what's going to happen in the Rings of Power, all you have to do is pick up a book, right? Okay. So Tolkien wrote about these elves, okay? If you're not familiar with Middle-earth, then you might not know that there are 3 races of elves. There are the Eldar, which is what Galadriel and Elrond are. Those are the Eldar, which are kind of like the pure blood. Think pure elves from across the ocean. They came here. They are the original elves. And then there's another race of elves called the Sindar, which are elves that have been born in Middle-earth, right? Those would be the Sindar elves. And then there's another group of elves that live in the woods and have basically gone feral, and those are the Sylvan elves. And that would be what Legolas is. Legolas, I think Legolas might still be a Sindar elf, but he's a Sylvan elf, the woods, Mirkwood and all that. Okay, and then Elrond is an Eldar, and but he's not really a warrior. He's kind of like a diplomat, a ambassador, and etc., etc. And he has a dwarven friend, etc. Okay, so when people say that the elves don't show any emotions, at this time in the Middle-earth history, if you know anything about Middle-earth, at this time, the only elves really that are running around are the Eldar. There are some Sindar, which I don't remember the character's name, but he's the elf that was on the borderlands in the Southlands, and he loves Bronwyn, if I remember right, Bronwyn, which is is a southern human. And I think he might be a Sindar because he's fairly young. I think he's only like 200 years old. But when you're looking at the Eldar from Linden, they are hundreds, plural, many hundreds years old. Okay. They fought against Morgoth. Morgoth is the predecessor to Sauron. Sauron wasn't the main villain. Morgoth was. And Morgoth was a god. He was evil. And the elves and the men and the dwarves fought against him. But then some men fought with him because men can be corrupted. Man can be corrupted. They can go either way, right? In different tribes, different kingdoms, or whatever. They can do whatever. But the elves, pure at heart, and the dwarves, basically stout and non-corruptible, fought against Morgoth. Okay, so Galadriel's brother was one of the first that came across the ocean to fight Morgoth from across the sea, and she followed him, right? And so she was there, present when he died. Now, Galadriel currently, after hunting and trying to find servants of Morgoth and then later Sauron, spent hundreds, and I'm not talking about days, hundreds of years seeking this out. Okay, so put yourself in the mindset of a soldier who's lost her entire family, has a singular purpose to get revenge, but she doesn't say it's revenge, but we all know it is. But it's also to do the right thing, to hunt these people down, and she's been hunting them for hundreds of years. She's been fighting orcs and ice trolls and probably hill giants and all kinds of things, treants. So she's probably been fighting things for hundreds of years. So first of all, her skill level is going to be high, right? And it's hard to really express how skilled she is on a TV screen, right? So if it looks like she's throwing a bunch of guards into a prison cell with ease, it's because she probably could do it with ease. When she, in the latest episode, when she fights these 5 guys, first of all, she doesn't fight them all at once. If she did, she probably would still win. And I'm not talking about the TV character. I'm talking about Galadriel from the books. If you take these 5 guys, what are they? 18 years old? They're 18 years old. And they have very limited fighting experience. They were still in basic training. And they weren't fighting very well. They were beating on each other. And Galadriel was invited to go in and teach them a lesson. And she does. She goes in, she fights these guys, and she basically dances around them because first of all, she's an elf, and elves in the world of Middle Earth are extremely agile and dexterous and quick, and could easily dodge those blows. And then she could easily turn around, and nobody was getting hurt. No, she's not trying to kill them. She's basically just trying to humiliate them. And she did. Think of her, and try to, I put this in terms of modern combat styles. If you were to think of a grand master of Kung Fu and put them into a room with 5 white belts that have not had any training and ask them to land a punch against this grand master of Kung Fu, they're not going to be able to do it. And then would she be able to punch them back? Absolutely. And so you just have to kind of look past the fact that it's hard to really express that on a small TV screen. It's easier to express it in the books. Okay, that's just one thing. So now also her personality. Yes, she's been crushed. She doesn't show emotions. Emotions would be her downfall. One of the reasons why she lived so long and was able to fight against the forces of Morgoth was because she could lock her emotions away and lock them up with a key and toss the key. She has them. She has emotions. She has feelings, but she's never going to show it. She's arrogant because, first of all, she's royalty, and most people don't realize this, but she's a queen. And maybe not currently at this time, but she comes from a noble family. And if you come from a noble family in the Eldar, you just take Eldar and put them on a pedestal, and then you take the nobility and you put them on a higher pedestal. I mean, she's friends with Elrond. She runs around in the circles with the king, and the elves in Middle-earth, specifically the Eldar, maybe not so much the Sindar or the Sylvan, which is the ones you see later in the movies, but the Eldar are obnoxious, right? They are pure assholery, right? They're up there like looking down at people like, I'm not going to go down there and get dirty with you. I'm superior. I walk on water, which actually elves can walk on snow with no problem. But yeah, so that's the way her upbringing has been. She loves men. She loves elves. She loves dwarves. She loves everybody, but she can't show it. But she also believes that she is superior. Why? Because she is. But she doesn't, like you would think, well, she doesn't have to show it. Well, she does, because that's the arrogance of the elves. Okay. We'll leave her off to the side. Something else that the pop culture crisis had mentioned. Where are the rings? This show's called Rings of Power, and I haven't seen any rings. They don't know the story. This is, I don't even think they know what the rings are. You got the Lord of the Rings, right? And so these guys are like, well, where are the rings? Okay. Whoever wrote the story, well, really it's an adaptation from the books. But whoever decided where to start this, I thought was a really good starting place. They started it about a whole season, Well, I don't know because I haven't seen the rest of the season, but I'm going to assume the whole season is pre-rings. And I bet you in the last episode or two, they forge the rings. Okay. There's a guy that meets Elrond, and he's a craftsman. He is the one that makes the rings. Has he made the rings yet? No. He's building a tower. Why? Because that tower is going to be, it's a magical tower. It's not just some tower. It's a tower where these rings are going to have they're going to be imbued with magic. And he needs this building created to make them. Okay. Elrond doesn't know this. Elrond is just a diplomat, and he's just doing what his High King is telling him to do. Go to the dwarves, communicate with them, come back, and we're learning all this through the story. So watch it and learn is what I'm trying to tell these guys. They don't know anything about the rings. Guess what? You're not going to see any rings probably till next season. And even then, that has nothing to do with what this story is about. It's maybe the story or the title of the story might be a misnomer because, and I'll grant you that, they're calling it the Rings of Power, but that's not what it's about. It's about the people before the rings and the build up until the rings. So if you don't know anything about the rings, there were 9 rings for mortal man. There were 3 rings for the dwarves under the mountain. And or was it 5? There was 5 rings for the dwarves under the mountain. And there were 3 rings for the elven kings. Okay. And 1 ring to rule them all. Okay. So initially, it's a little spoiler here, those of you that don't know, these rings were meant to be a gift from the elves to all these kings, right? And they're rings of power. Okay, they are rings of power. So it's supposed to make these kings more powerful so they could fight against the coming darkness, the second coming of darkness, which is Sauron. And if my memory serves me right, Sauron makes the one ring that has the ability to control these other rings, or to corrupt them, I should say. The dwarves were uncorruptible, so they die. The dwarven kings that receive these rings die and take their rings with them. The elves have this magic about them. Duh, they're the Eldar. They resist, and they are able to not be corrupted by this one ring. The humans have absolutely no resistance, and they become corrupted and later become the 9 ring wraiths. Okay? So they actually become undead creatures fighting for Sauron. Okay. And then Sauron wearing the ring, fighting the elves and the men and the dwarves. And one of the characters in the show, which I think is Halbrand, he's the human king from the south. I think it's him. I think he cuts the ring off of Sauron's finger. I don't think he picks it up. Maybe he does. Like he picks it up and wants to use it himself to, to be more powerful or whatever. And then eventually he is killed and the ring falls into a river somewhere. And then many centuries later, Gollum finds the ring, and then Bilbo and Frodo and all that transpires centuries later. 4 centuries, I think, and or maybe even longer. And then they have this big quest to go destroy that ring because it corrupts all the other rings. And really, the only other rings available are the ring wraiths and the Elven rings. And Galadriel has one of those rings. Elrond, I think, has one of the rings. And a king in Lindon, I think, has one of the rings. I think. Okay, and then you got this guy falling from the sky, right? The asteroid that lands and crashes, and he's an angel. They don't really talk about it. They kind of don't really explain any of that, which is good. It makes you wonder if you're not familiar. But I think he's going to be Gandalf, but he also might be Saruman, because Saruman initially started out as being a good guy, and then eventually got corrupted, and Gandalf had to kick his ass. But Saruman, but there's 5 angels that fell to Middle Earth. There's Radagast the Brown. There's a couple of blue wizards that fell way to the east. And then there's Saruman and Gandalf. And I think he's one of them. And they're following him. Gandalf would be Gandalf or Saruman. But he could be Radagast the Brown, actually. But I don't know. We don't know yet. But I know he's going to be one of them. And the elves and the orcs. Okay. I'm just trying to think of some things that were said where they don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It just seems like they're coming from a position of ignorance. They're not meaning to be negative. It's just they have assumptions. They have preconceived assumptions when they go to watch this. They expect there to be a Marvel movie cinematic universe or whatever. They expect there to be fighting in every episode. They expect there to be emotions and love scenes and all that kind of stuff. And that's not the Lord of the Rings. The movies, The Hobbit, and then the 3 books of the Lord of the Rings are really good stories because there is a lot of fighting and there are wars, there are battles between orcs and elves and dwarves and all that stuff. There's going through the countryside and fighting trolls and giants and stuff like that. So that's the kind of stories those were, to grab your attention in this world. But when you go back in time, which is where this Rings of Power TV series is located, there's not really that going on in the world. There is a buildup there's backstory, and they're trying to mold you and show you the different aspects of this world, which are very different all over. And I think in the next episode or 2, it's really going to come together, because the Númenóreans, which Aragorn was a Númenórean, but that's way in the future, is going to come to the land to help the southern kingdoms regain his kingdom and things like that. But I think they've always been allied with the evil side. So I don't really know. So it's kind of cool me watching and learning. Something I wanted to say also, all the different storylines all over the planet, is good. I like that. It reminds me of some other shows that we watched, like The Expanse. The Expanse had a million different stories all over the place. There are other shows out there that have millions of different stories. And then eventually they all come together and form. This is not a Fellowship of the Ring. This is not a party adventure. This is a bunch of little stories. And so you have to kind of, the books, which I got like 7 books right there in Lord of the Rings. It's a bunch of little stories. And I think the author of this show is putting them together very well. Could it be done differently? Sure, but you're not going to get a fight scene in every episode, and I liken it to some other shows, like, I don't know, a soap opera even. I watch a soap opera and there's not a fight scene in any soap opera, except for maybe when there's like a fist punch here and there. But that's not why you watch soap operas, right? I'm not saying The Lord of the Rings is a soap opera, but it's also not a war movie, is what I'm trying to say. It's not a war movie. If you want to think of it like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I kind of liken it to this, you've got the Captain America movie, right? And then you've got the Iron Man movie, right? And then you've got the Thor movie and the Hulk movie, and then you've got like Spider-Man, and then you've got Captain Marvel, or then you've got who knows what, Ant-Man or whatever. You've got all these individual movies, and then at the end of their run, they put them all together, and now you have the Avengers, right? And then they take all these characters from their individual comic book series, and they bring them into one team up, matchup, whatever. That's what's kind of happening in The Lord of the Rings. They've got each of these individual heroes, because they are heroes in their own right. I suspect maybe by the end of the series, or maybe the beginning of the second series, they're going to bring them together, and then they're going to have to fight Sauron and his minions and stuff like that. But right now, that's not happening. The orcs, running around, that's kind of a surprise. People are like, what? There's orcs here? What the hell's going on? The elves know because they've been on guard, but they were just given an order. The war was over. Come home. And that's when the orcs took advantage of them and attacked. So, yeah, there's most people in Middle Earth think the war is over. Some elves know it isn't. But most elves think it is, and they're trying to go home. I don't know. I'm talking around in circles right now. But I just wanted to say, if you're going to critique a TV series, learn something about what the TV series, learn the material, is what I'm trying to say. Now, if you don't care about the material, if you just care about how it's filmed and how the actors are portraying their characters without any knowledge of what they're supposed to be like, you're doing it an injustice, right? Because the actress that's doing Galadriel, I think is doing a bang up job. I think she's doing a really good job for being a young Galadriel. And then Elrond, I never would have pictured him being as young as they're showing. But guess what? This is way back when. This is hundreds of years before The Lord of the Rings. And then Durin, he's orcs are so not orcs. Dwarves are supposed to be boisterous, emotional, always, grumpy and stuff like that. And I think he's doing a really good, but also funny and laughing and stuff like that. So I think he's doing a really good job. And then the elf that's with Bronwyn, portraying like, I'm above emotions, but I still love you. He in like maybe even in the first episode, she said something like, you've never said you loved me. And he said something that should have just told you. That was like Elf 101. He says, you should know how I feel based on my actions. So he doesn't have to say it, right? And so that's not when that blew me away. I was like, whoa, he's absolutely right. Because elves don't talk about that. You think they do, right? Elves from D&D are like that, but that's not Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings. Well, first of all, elves from D&D are all based on Lord of the Rings elves, but there's a little bit of liberty taken. But think of it. I often think of the elves as from Asian culture. Very, very reserved. Don't really share any of their. They always have very strict etiquette, like samurai. They can't show what they really mean or feel. They have to kind of be guarded and reserved, and that's how the elves are. And speaking of allegories, like I'm using right now, somebody on Pop Culture Crisis, I think this was from the first video, or maybe this was that individual YouTuber I watched, I don't remember. They said that J.R.R. Tolkien hated allegories, and he didn't want people to think that his stories were allegorical. Unfortunately, we all know that to be a lie. We know his stories that he was telling, the stories he was writing were 100% allegorical. And I'll use this as an example. The Lord of the Rings, the original story, The Lord of the Rings, was World War II. Sauron being Hitler. Saruman being Mussolini. Mordor being Germany. Gondor being England, being right next to Mordor. And there just happened to be a river between the two. Channel. The Fellowship was a story written in this world that had nothing to do with World War II, but it had to maneuver itself through their journey through the world to get to Mordor and destroy the ring, right? But that story is not allegorical. But the world background, the history, the backdrop of the world is allegorical to World War II. There is a great battle between Gondor, where the Germans come across the river and attack Gondor. You could kind of think that it might be France/Britain. You know, you got the Rohirrim. They came in. And then eventually, towards the end of the battle, when Gondor was going to be overrun and destroyed, the Black Fleet shows up with the undead, and they pour off these landing craft and pile into Gondor and the Americans. And it was D-Day all over again. These guys piled in, they came out, and they destroyed the orcs and the Germans, right? So it's like taking that entire World War II story and turning it into a fantasy world. And that's the Lord of the Rings, the War of the Ring. But if you go back in time, it's all build up to those books. So basically, writing these books, he decided to write the history of the world so that you could envision the current situation, the War of the Rings, knowing where everything came from, where the rings came from, where the elves came from, and all that stuff. And that's what the Rings of Power TV series is. It's prehistory. And so by saying it's non-allegorical is, or he doesn't want it to be allegorical, but then the TV series is allegorical, well, get over it. It's going to be allegorical because you just can't get away from that. And I don't have a problem with it being allegorical. And I'm a hypersensitive anti-woke person. So when I'm watching woke shows, it does bother me. Lord of the Rings does not bother me. I don't find it to be woke. Even if it is, it's not blatant, right? You got the Queen of Numenor. What's wrong with that? There was a Queen of Numenor. There was a king, and she's the regent. I get that. I don't have a problem with that. Galadriel being a super powerful elven warrior. I don't have a problem with that. Bronwyn not being a very powerful leader. She's trying to rally her people to fight against the darkness, and she's no good at it. Well, guess what? She's a freaking farmer. She's not, supposed to be good at that. So I don't, and then even the halflings, the Harfoots or whatever, I don't have a problem with one of the main characters in the halflings being a very friendly, hyper happy female, because hell, they're halflings, So I don't have any problem with the wokeness of the show. I don't see it. I think they're doing really well. And Amazon, if you're watching my stream. You're doing a good job. Keep it up. Don't listen to the negative Nancys out there that are saying your show is bad, because they're not the audience. The audience, if it's me that you're targeting, well, you're hitting it nail on the head. All right, guys. Thanks for coming out and listening to me rant about this. I know I went a little long. I didn't have a script. I didn't really know what I wanted to say, but I appreciate you coming out and listening to this. And if you liked the video, please like it. If you hated my comments, please dislike it. If you want to leave me a comment, please do. If you want to hate on me, go ahead. I don't mind. You go ahead and tell me your thoughts. If you agree with me, tell me you agree with me. If you disagree with me, then you're wrong. All right, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.